We just watched the premiere episode of Gotham, and we're going to start talking about it in a second. Before we do, if you don't want to have anything about this first episode ruined for you, you might want to move along. Otherwise, stick around and you can see what we thought about it. And what did you think, good sir? Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with that. We're all done. Thank you for joining us.
Should we talk about the premise, before we even get into the...
Sure, why not? Let's start with the base level on this thing.
So, if you saw The Dark Knight Rises and you liked the 90 minutes where Batman wasn't saving the people of Gotham City, this show is for you. It's Batman's world without Batman, and that made me nervous from the get-go.
Yeah, I know.
Long before I ever saw the show, I thought this was doomed to failure. Once the show started, I was enjoying the show for about the first 20 minutes. And then I feel like right at the halfway point, it took a bizarre turn. I felt like they were approaching it in a very sort of standard formulaic police procedural way that was working. And then they decided it needs to be a bigger conspiracy, but they had no idea how to do that.
Yeah, they've made the strange decision to take a number of things and turn them into mysteries where there's no reason to have that be a mystery. Like, it's obviously it's going to be a mystery. Who knows how long they're stringing out? Who actually killed Bruce Wayne's parents and why? Except that that's never mattered.
It's the least interesting mystery. Gotham City, the place itself, is responsible for the death of the Waynes. That's why it needed to create Batman. So I don't need them to find out who killed them.
Well, the other thing, they've tossed these hints at some sort of weird backstory for Jim Gordon's future wife, Barbara.
That was precisely the point when the show took, kind of went off the rails.
It started getting weird, right?
Jim Gordon, the main character, his girlfriend, soon-to-be wife, Barbara, has a past lover in Detective Renee Montoya, who is a lesbian in the comics. But that is only introduced in order to create this weird division and make Renee seem jealous and petty. It seemed like it was just a plot point because they needed to give Gordon a reason to suspect that there was a frame job.
Yeah. That was really the point where I started picking apart even what had gone on up to that point.
Yeah.
Because I don't like this Jim Gordon. Because and to kind of illustrate why, I have to reference Gary Oldman. Now I'm gonna try and do this not in a way that I'm like, he was the best and it must be like him,
right.
But I need to illustrate what he did right to illustrate what this guy's doing wrong. What I hoped this show would be is kind of in the embodiment of a number of scenes that Gordon has in Batman Begins.
Sure.
He's got this line, I'm no rat,
right.
But in a town this bent, who is there to rat to? So I liked this notion of the dynamic of a guy who's a good guy and who's trying to be a good guy, but who knows, is completely aware and has no illusions about the world he's living in.
He's resigned to the idea that he can't change this.
Yes, he's going to be the best guy he can under the world's worst circumstances that he knows he can't change.
Right.
What they've gone for instead is the more traditional, I am righteous and upright and I will fight this corruption. And I'm like, oh, come on. It's not as interesting.
It brings up a problem, again, going to the very premise of this, was Jim Gordon couldn't change Gotham. He needed Batman to do that. And if you're having a show without Batman, then Jim can't succeed. Or if he makes Gotham City a better place, then you've invalidated the need for Batman.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I don't see how they can win. All right, so getting back to the point, another problem with the character of Gordon, and this goes to what's at the heart of the show, is Gordon and Bullock, their partnership. Mm-hmm. Two very different characters, which they depicted them as having very different characteristics, but the actors also play them very different intensity levels.
Yeah.
But usually when you're talking to someone, when you're interacting with another person, you match their intensity. If somebody starts raising their voice, you tend to start raising your voice. And that's a natural progression. And that never happened in this show. They were always on different wavelengths. And it
seems like almost everybody who was in the show was just on their own wavelength, and it bore no relation to whatever else was going on around them. Everyone just kind of picked, this is what I am for this scene. I'm like, well, everyone else is going for, no, I'm this.
Right. Yeah, I noticed that when it seemed like Jada Pinkett Smith's character was channeling Michael Kenneth Williams from The Wire and Boardwalk Empire. I was like, oh, I've seen this.
I mean, that said, I actually kind of liked her. She was one of the highlights for me.
She was fun to watch. It was a watchable character.
I had a couple of things that I liked. They were few, but I had a couple of things.
Okay, let's talk about the pros then.
All right, I liked her. Mm-hmm. I have to assume that she's not going to stick around past this season at any rate, because she's a made-up character for this show, and she's obviously there to get knocked out and to have a more recognizable person take her place in that place in the crime world.
She's on borrowed time. Yeah.
Yes, which is a shame. I actually, surprisingly, liked the Penguin.
He was the standout.
Yeah.
I think. And they've made him a much more vicious, physically sort of visceral, predatory character, which I was surprised they took him that far this quickly.
It happened a little faster than I saw, but what I liked about it was we got his initial introduction and he was this sort of sniveling, like sort of backstabbing. It's a little bit of a stock character when you're doing any kind of organized crime movie. He's the obvious person who's got to backstab to work his way up the lines. But these sort of characters, they're always sniveling, they're weak, they're meager. But to have that contrast with just how vicious he is at the same time, I'm like, that is actually pretty interesting.
Production value, I mean, it
looks good.
I mean,
it's a good looking show.
From the opening shots of the city, I mean, they made it look like a lived-in place with a lot of color contrasts, sort of like the bright lights of like the street with these high rises and everything. Other pros, other things.
Other pros. I kind of like the guy they got for Carmine Falcone.
It was a late addition. It felt like a late reveal that didn't need to be in this episode. He seemed just way too forward with Jim Gordon for somebody he's never met. He's telling this character a lot for the sake of exposition.
There was a lot of that in general. Yes. There was a lot of characters saying things that I'm like, why would you ever say that? I think, for me, best epitomized by Gordon telling a young, preteen, angry Bruce Wayne, oh, the guy who the papers said killed your parents and who I helped take down didn't actually kill him. It's somebody else. I don't know who it is. And then immediately follows with, don't tell anybody.
Yeah, please, I'm asking you to keep your mouth shut about this horrible conspiracy that I just confided to a legal minor in front of this British butler who's shown a strange kind of hostility towards me in the 2 minutes that I've known him.
Yeah.
There were times where I felt like this show was going through rewrites while they were filming it. The big one is in the middle of the show. There's this discussion where Gordon and Bullock realize they solved the case incorrectly. They got it bad. That the guy they thought killed the Waynes might be innocent. That it might have been a frame job. And then it becomes this whole fear and paranoia that they actually killed an innocent man and that they could lose their jobs for that.
Except
forgetting the circumstances of how the shooting went down, that the man was about to stab Gordon with a knife in an alley after shooting at him. Any police force in the world would consider that a righteous shooting when Bullock takes him out.
I feel like it could have worked slightly better if there could have been some breathing room.
Right.
It was very rapid fire, but the thing is, unless you're doing Law and Order, which was a show literally constructed to, we solve this case by the end of this hour.
Right.
Unless you're doing that, you need to slow down a little bit so that we have weight to the proceedings and we get a feel for how this works.
I feel like the place this first episode needs to end is the realization that the case isn't closed, that they got the wrong guy. And that would have given them enough time to go through the basic logistics of the police investigation, and then there's this reveal of, wait, that's not the wrong guy. It might have been the police themselves who framed this, who set this all up.
Yeah.
And that sort of blows up Gordon's world, and that's a great place to end the first episode.
Yeah, and
when he
not
can't
to
trust
mention,
the system.
If they'd taken that half hour and made it a full hour, we could have had a legitimate procedural, which we didn't have either. Because that's the thing. If the pitch is Gotham City as procedural, it wasn't a procedural.
Do you intend to watch the next episode?
Possibly out of morbid curiosity. Me catching the second episode of this has just dropped several priority notches, and depending on how much free time I have, I might not even bother. My basic feel is that if you're going to do TV shows of these characters that you are also planning on putting in movies, This sort of approach, where the TV show is completely different from the film character, is the way to go.
Sure.
Versus what I'm afraid what they're doing with the Flash and Green Arrow, which is that they're doing them straight, which means if we ever get them in movies as well, we're also going to get them straight, and then you've got two competing visions that you can't help but compare.
Right.
And I think that's dangerous. But so I like the angle that they came at this act from. I don't like the results though. So just so we can get into crazy, stupid, wild speculation, just throw a name out there. Who actually killed the Waynes? Either pulled the trigger or had it ordered.
Alfred.
Alfred? Okay, you heard it here first. Alfred Pennyworth orchestrated the killing of the Waynes.
There you go.
So thank you for joining us, and until next time, this council is adjourned.